What's going on YouTube? It's Tej, back again with another video and back to talk about my updated Week 10 NFL Power Rankings. Excited to talk about who's moving up, who's moving down with you. Leave me your thoughts down below in the comments section. Who should be higher, who should be lower, who's your favorite team, and where should they be in these Power Rankings. You guys get the gist of it. Let's go ahead and jump into it. Starting with the Carolina Panthers, moving down a spot. So we have the Cardinals staying at 32, Carolina at 31. I finally feel like these two have found the right spot. I feel like the Cardinals, until we get to see Kyler Murray, which maybe that'll happen this weekend, but they're probably 31, 32. The Panthers feel like the other half of that, 31 and 32. So good to have those two teams back together where it feels like they should be. They're not great, but the Cardinals are loading up draft capital, and the Panthers are still kind of figuring out their long-term identity. Tough week for Bryce Young. It always hurts a little bit to see him play the way he did this weekend. But don't get too distressed if you're a Panthers fan. There have been plenty of rookies that weren't great that first year, bounced back and ultimately became the best quarterback in their class, a la Matt Stafford back in that 08 draft. So hold out hope for that. I know, but it was definitely tough to see C.J. Stroud ball out while Bryce Young looked like that. Then we go to the Giants. They're down a spot. Daniel Jones out for the year. I wish I could say good things about the Giants, but the offensive line's been a mess. The defense has been up and down. You have some pieces there that are exciting, and they've definitely been games. But there's only so much that unit can do when you're playing a game with Tommy DeVito under center, and maybe it's Matt Barkley next week. So they're seeing a whole lot of time on the field. They're getting tired. They're getting left out to dry, literally. So tough time to be a Giants fan. Tough time to be a Giants defender, and specifically defensive coordinator Wink Martindale. And then the Bears are down 2 spots. Tyson Bagent didn't play the worst game. We got to see his legs put on display, but a couple of head scratching decisions made in there as well that ultimately kind of cost them. And the Bears, defensive line continues to be inept at being able to create pressure. So kind of the same issues I've had with the Bears pretty much all season. But the good news is hopefully you get Justin Fields back in time for Thursday night in a winnable game against the Carolina Panthers. And then the Patriots are down 2 spots as well. They're just not very good. I mean, there's just not a whole lot more that I can say that I haven't already said about this squad. Mac Jones is just not great. It was good to see them, bounce back from falling behind 10-0, but then ultimately they kind of fell there at the last minute. There's just too many pieces missing from that defense, and the offense is kind of in shambles right now. So yeah, they have the worst record in the AFC for a reason, which is something I never thought I'd hear. But I guess all things are inevitable. The Raiders are up 4 spots. I don't want to get too carried away. This is about as much as I'd like to move a team up in one given week, just because if they continue to play well, I'll get them next week, But, that first week coaching bump was definitely there with Antonio Pierce. There just felt like there was actually like a pulse to the team. There was an identity. There was a feel, as opposed to like the McDaniels and Ziegler era. Kind of felt like they were going through the motions, robotic almost. Like they're doing things, but I don't know if they're building toward anything. And I don't know if any of it really comes together and fit other than like, hey, there's a New England guy. That guy kind of feels like a New England fit. And that was about it. Now it feels like, okay, they have a pulse to this team. They have a heart. And Antonio Pierce is definitely that. So we'll see how much that carries into week 2. I do feel like, Aiden O'Connell played his best game. He got that coach bump. Feels like a spot for regression, but we're going to really get to see what Pierce as well as O'Connell are all about going up against the Jets this week. Falcons are down 2 spots. Man, this is a game they should have won. And really, specifically as the tackling against Josh Dobbs, like there were a lot of open field missed tackles, and then also just like they didn't get the right angle on him, so they didn't get the chance to wrap him up. It feels like this game plays out a whole lot differently if Josh Dobbs doesn't have 20-yard scrambles, 16-yard scrambles, and plays that should have ended earlier or should not have happened in the first place, because he wasn't great as a passer. And the Falcons scored a good bit of points. So I feel like if you clean up that open field tackling, this game plays out really different. So I know that's going to be Ryan Nielsen and Arthur Smith's focus this upcoming week at practice. But also you get the same rhetoric of like, where's Bijan Robinson? Where's Kyle Pitts? So it feels like Arthur Smith's trying to outthink the league and, put together an efficient offense without using his best players, but I think he'd have a whole lot easier time using his best players and therefore garnering a very efficient offense. I had the Buccaneers stay put at 25. I know they lost, but I didn't love where I basically had some of these teams. I had to move the Commanders up, and I think the Commanders might be a little bit better than the Buccaneers, but ultimately the Buccaneers, man, that defense kind of let them down. And, every time I looked up while watching on Red Zone, man, it felt like Carlton Davis is getting beat, and that was a guy I liked a ton. And I was happy when the Bucs re-signed him. So if you're a Tampa Bay fan, let me know what you've been thinking about Carlton Davis and his play this year. It feels like every time I look up and watch the Buccaneers, he's getting burned. So am I just catching the wrong plays? Has he been that bad year round? Yes or no? Because that is going to be something that maybe I have to address then in draft time. Maybe the Bucs need one more corner or something. But I think Baker ultimately played a good game. Mike Evans was solid. Very quiet Chris Godwin day, but they found other playmakers to kind of step up in his absence statistically. So yeah, pretty good day for the offense. I think Houston's defense is susceptible to giving up games like this, and the Buccaneers offense looked pretty good, but the defense just didn't step up and ultimately couldn't get a stop with only 40 seconds left to go in that game, and that's the difference. So Commanders are up 2 spots. I think the Bucs and the Commanders are about the same. Like, there's pieces of the defense I like. There are games played by the quarterback that get me excited about it. Maybe they could, be the guy for next year too. And there's some talent on the outside. They feel very similar. They're just so up and down, so inconsistent. Ultimately, maybe those coaches in those spots aren't the right guys, Ron Rivera and Todd Bowles respectively, but they're pretty similar. Commanders coming off a win though, so they're moving up 2 spots. And I had the Buccaneers stay put. I had the Colts and the Broncos flip places. I don't like moving teams when they're on the bye, but Colts got a solid win, man, and good day to be Kenny Moore. It was good to see that defense really bounce back. They had a rough performance against the Saints, so it was good to see that defense figure itself out. Certainly helps when you're playing a struggling offense like Carolina's. And then the offense really didn't play great, but they kind of won despite it. So feels like they're still, kind of figuring out life with Gardner Minshew, and maybe gets better this upcoming week. But ultimately, I think the Colts deserved the opportunity to move back up, considering we saw that defense bounce back. Broncos, I moved them up 7 spots the week prior. Now let's move them down a spot. 23 feels about right for Denver. Despite, again, I don't love moving teams when they've been on the bye. Rams and Packers flip places with the result of their respective games. So, or their respective game, I should say. It's a Brett Rippon game. This doesn't really speak to a whole lot of what the Rams are. And honestly, ask me how I think that game plays out with Matt Stafford. I'll tell you, I think it plays out differently. The Packers get the fortunate, reality of seeing Brett Rippon this Sunday. The Rams kind of suffer because of it. It'll be interesting to see, now that they signed Carson Wentz, what does that mean for Matt Stafford? Like, how long is he out? And then also, we've seen Baker Mayfield look good in that system. We've seen, Matt Stafford, win a Super Bowl and also have a career renaissance this year in the system. Maybe this is the offense that figures out or makes Carson Wentz look better. So some things to keep your eye on there for if you're a Rams fan. And then the Packers, ultimately I think these teams are pretty similar. And again, I think the Rams win if Stafford's playing. The Packers defense was shut down. Again, Brett Rippon effect there. So how much is that Green Bay? How much is it Rippon? And then the offense, still struggling, man. And those pass catchers, specifically Watson and Dobbs, I just want to see more out of them. I want to see one of these guys take a step forward to be the guy. And now you got Brian Gutekunst talking about, hey, the rest of the season's big for Jordan Love, so they're not even really committed to him. So he's kind of walking on eggshells. The ball placement has gotten kind of worse and worse over the course of the season for Love. So don't love to see that. These 2 teams kind of feel like they're just tailor-made somewhere in this 20 to 17 range. Then the Titans and Saints flip spots here. Saints with, not the most impressive win against Chicago because it's a team that's below them in the power rankings, right? But ultimately did enough to kind of win that game. It was crazy to see Michael Thomas go so long in that contest without a catch. But man, that Saints defense is still generally really, really solid. Demario Davis is playing really good football. They're generating enough pass rush. Also, Paulson Adebo, Alontae Taylor, 2 guys that I thought, hey, they're big wild cards coming into the season for the Saints. I could see them having that step forward in year 2, year 3, respectively. Or, if they continue to play at the same rate, maybe that's an issue spot for the Saints. Those 2 have stepped up, and then some. They have really kind of rounded out that secondary there in New Orleans. And then ultimately, I moved the Titans down. They lose to the Steelers. I think they're pretty close to Pittsburgh. And ultimately, I was really impressed with Will Levis. I thought short week against Pittsburgh, he'll look rough. But before that final drive, 4 big time throws, no turnover worthy plays to take a PFF stat. He played really, really well until that last quarter and really that last drive. And, 3 turnover-worthy plays. But what choice does he have? Throw it short? What do you want? Kirk Cousins, 4th and 8, throwing it short of the sticks and the game ends that way? Or Will Levis is trying to make a play and ultimately throws a seam route where the linebacker's carrying deep and it becomes an interception in the end zone? Of those 2 realities, at least you tried to make a play. I can live with that. That being said, that first almost pick by Pat Peterson on the throw left sideline to DeAndre Hopkins, that was rough. Pat Pete knew that was coming. He ran the route for D-Hop, positioned him to where he can't get the ball, and that was almost, really rough end of the night there for Tennessee. I'll live with the interception he ultimately did throw versus that one that almost was intercepted. Pittsburgh's going to stay at 17. Look, they're winning in spite of that offense. Kenny Pickett had 2 throws between the hashes. That's just unacceptable for a guy that was very good targeting the middle of the field at college. I know wider hashes, but still, he was very good at attacking the middle of the field. And also, Kenny Pickett does not have a great arm. So why do you consistently ask this guy with, not an elite arm to win on the perimeter? And also think about how much more dangerous someone like a George Pickens gets. when you add an in-breaking route to his, route tree. And honestly, look at Nico Collins. He's the perfect example. Like, not a guy who ran a whole lot of in-breaking routes. Houston asked him to do it, and all of a sudden it does enough to diversify the portfolio of routes that he can run and adds one more play where he can win in the field, and he's having a breakout season. It feels like that's something that George Pickens would be really, really awesome at. So that's what the Steelers get for, sticking with Matt Canada instead of hiring, a smart guy like a Shanahan disciple like a Bobby Slowick. Maybe next offseason we'll make the move there. But Canada sucks. The offense is inefficient because of it. The one thing I can say, Jalen Warren, Najee Harris, those guys are both running really well. So it's been good to see the Steelers kind of figure out that part of their identity. And then we get on to the Jets. They're down 4 spots. Man, dude. That offense is brutal, man. And, even if this is the best year we've seen Zach Wilson have, it doesn't mean he's good. And simply put, he's just not doing enough to win games. Defense is still playing solid. But once they basically give up that special teams touchdown, I feel like I want to see the ratings before and after. Because after that touchdown, there had to have been so many TVs that just clicked off the game. Because at that point, give the Jets a 7-point, mountain to supersede. They just can't do it. I mean, they struggled enough just forcing overtime against the Giants, who had -9 passing yards. You know what I'm saying? So, against the Chargers, who are a better team, and down by 7, it was kind of over before it started. Vikings on stay put. Nice win. Josh Dobbs and Dobbs we trust, man. That was a lot of fun to watch, but in reality, that was a win they shouldn't have had. And honestly, they're only going to play better opponents after this. They had this winnable 4 more games in this 6-game stretch in total. That was a pretty favorable part of the schedule. But after that, it gets really rough. Dobbs can only be more prepared moving forward, but ultimately I think we'll see kind of natural regression towards the mean. That was a game they shouldn't have won, and ultimately I think things kind of will work themselves out over the course of the season. Texans are up 2 spots. CJ Stroud, historic day. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself just because he has he sets rookie records doesn't mean he's the greatest rookie of all time, but I've been thoroughly impressed with CJ Stroud. And he's probably right now somewhere in that QB 14 to QB 10 range. He's legitimately probably played that well. I've said it multiple times now, multiple weeks in a row now, where the processing's elite. And, beginning of the season, I thought the accuracy could be even better. This week, we saw the full capabilities. And he's also just got that swagger about him. He had the quote after the game where, you leave time on the clock, I'm going to make you pay. He totally plays with that mentality. And we get to see the mobility more at the NFL level. Ultimately, he was a guy that was a top 10 player on my big board for a reason. This is a guy I thought should go top 10. And, man, Houston has really hit the lottery here with both CJ Stroud and Bobby Slowick. Feels like the perfect combination, perfect QB for Slowick, and the perfect offense for Stroud to be in, and things are rolling really well there in Houston. I'd like to see that defense play better, but man, kudos to the offense for getting that W. Chargers are up a spot. Look, the Jets offense is nothing special, but really it was the pass rush that really impressed me for the Chargers. Get some stacks from Tulu to Opelotu. Joey Bosa over the last 2 weeks has figured himself out. He looks like the Joey Bosa of old. So if that pass rush continues to play that way, I start to feel a lot more better about, or I feel much better about this Chargers defense. Forgot how to speak there for half a second. And I think that eases a lot of my concerns that this team might have on the back end too. So if that Chargers pass rush keeps it up, I think the offense is going to find ways to win games even without, Mike Williams in that offense. And ultimately, Keenan Allen continues to make ridiculous plays. That catching out on the right sideline was bananas. But they'll continue to piece games together as long as they get that pass rush. If that subsides and it goes back to where it was the first 7 weeks of the year, Chargers defense specifically might be in trouble. Seahawks are down a spot. I don't want to overreact. They got wiped off the floor by the Baltimore Ravens. No other way to put it. The offense looked completely lethargic. But ultimately, that's the one game this year where I can say Seattle's offense looked completely, just really not themselves. So I'm going to say that's the one game fluke. The Ravens defense is awesome. Mike McDonald, kind of positioned himself to be one of the hottest names when it comes to the head coaching carousel. So I want to give the Ravens credit. Now, granted, I do think offense dictates defensive results. But man, I think that Ravens defense is legit and did enough early on to really throw off Seattle and their timing and their rhythm. And then it became a huge mountain to kind of climb and get over, and Seattle just couldn't do it. So they basically put themselves in a hole and couldn't get out. So I don't want to overreact to 1 week, but it was a rough week there for Seattle. Browns are up 2 spots. That defense continues to be electric. Therefore, blanking the number 32 team in these power rankings. Not the crazy surprise. And also the first career start for Clayton Tune. So as much as I say offense dictates good defense, I mean, this is exactly what I talk about. You're facing Clayton Tune, that defense is going to look electric, especially when you already have a great defense like Cleveland. So good week to be a Cleveland Browns. Still don't think Deshaun Watson's playing great. Some throws that he kind of missed. And also, he's got the pass that finds a helmet and then ultimately becomes a touchdown. That's crazy. But he's obviously a huge improvement over, PJ Walker. So, step in the right direction there. Mark Cooper continues to play great football. I feel like nobody's talking about Cooper as still like a top 10 wide receiver. And I don't know if I'm just missing where that conversation is being had. But I think he should be in and around that conversation still. Like maybe he's not number 10. Maybe like someone like an Amon-Ra St. Brown superseded him, but he's no worse than like wide receiver 14, 15 right now, right? So I don't know. I just don't feel like I hear a lot of people talking about it. Detroit Lions, they're going to stay at 10, so they're still in a really good spot there. And then we get inside the top 10, and we get to the Buffalo Bills, who fall down another spot, man. It's been a precipitous fall of the last 2 weeks for the Buffalo Bills. I think they fell 4 spots last week, and now another one. I don't think Josh Allen played a bad game. Ultimately, that interception early was just a boneheaded decision to make. They got some stuff out of Dalton Kincaid, but, I'm looking at the other receivers, and you get a couple big catches from Khalil Shakir, but, where's Gabe Davis? He had a really quiet night. I feel like this team needs one more playmaker. So, I've had mocks where they take Roma Dunze or like a Keon Coleman. They have to move up to get those guys because I think those guys are going top half of the first round. But, that as a replacement to Gabe Davis, who's hitting the free agent market, I think might be the best thing for this offense. They just need guys who can win in other places of the field. And, 2 weeks ago, I thought Gabe Davis looked really dynamic with the ball in his hands. So I was like, man, if you use him as a yak weapon and as a deep threat, okay, now you're adding more ways to have him be a part of the offense. But then this week, it was just like, hey, deep threat. Let's see if Gabe Davis can get open. Can he win this one-on-one? So I don't know. They got to find a way to use him in more, parts of the offense, or they got to find someone else who can do more in that offense at the wide receiver spot. So until then, man, I feel like this Bills defense Bills team in general is backsliding, especially with the injuries catching up on the defensive side. All right, Dolphins are down 4 spots. I mean, like, if your kryptonite is losing to good teams, like, there are worse kryptonites to have, right? Like, there are a lot of teams who struggle against the Kansas City Chiefs, right? But yeah, man, it is like an on-off switch against teams with a above 500 and teams with a below 500 record, and that'll dictate where the Dolphins are at. I generally think the defense played pretty well. And especially first game seeing Ramsey and Xavier Howard together, plus that pass rush, that feels like a really solid unit moving forward. And they're still in the top 8. I don't think the Dolphins are terrible. I think they're bound to get that big win against a big time opponent. And honestly, once they get that first one, I'm feeling really good about this team. And now once they show themselves they can do it once, I think they'll be fine thereafter. But there was also opportunities in the second half after they make it 21-14 to tie that one up, and then ultimately, kind of a missed snap kind of takes that opportunity away. So it feels like they're one play away from getting what they need in these big games and these big matchups. But yeah, this was another tough one for them to drop because I don't think Kansas City played their best game, but obviously then Miami was far from their best game as well. Really quiet offensive start, and then when they finally got it going, kind of lost that momentum at the worst time. Cowboys are down a spot. I mean, look, they lost the number 1 team in these power rankings, and they did ultimately keep it close, but this is the exact game that everyone's talking about with Dallas. They can't win the big one. Kind of like Miami. These two teams at 7 and 8, it's like, do it on the biggest stage, and then we'll finally take it into account. We'll be impressed, right? I feel like that's been the narrative for the last couple of weeks for both these sides. So kind of the same stuff I talked about with the Dolphins apply here to the Dallas. I don't think they played their worst game, but they didn't play their best. CeeDee Lamb goes bananas, like almost 200 yards receiving. And I'm still generally like a big fan of that defense, So hate to move them down a spot. They lost to a good football team, but that's been the talking point with the Dallas Cowboys. Jags are up a spot. I don't like moving teams up on the bye, so I did want to flip here Jags and Cowboys because I had to move the Cowboys down. And despite Jacksonville being on the bye, they've been a really good team. And 5-game win streak going into the bye, they get some points for that here, moving up to number 6. I'm gonna have San Francisco stay at 5. They were also on the bye. Really excited to see this Jaguars-49ers games, Team 5 and 6 going head-to-head. That's going to be a lot of fun. 49ers favored on the road by 3. That's going to be one of the bets that I definitely like going into this week. And ultimately, I think they're going to be just fine. I don't see them losing a 4th straight game this upcoming week. Cincinnati, they moved up, I believe, more than just one spot. That might be an error on my end, so apologies for that. I think they moved up 3. So, again, my apologies for that. But, man, I mean, with the way they played the last 2 weeks, they've beaten 2 of the best teams in football, with the 49ers and the Bills, 2 teams in my top 10. And they've looked, I mean, maybe not so much against the Bills. There were definitely moments in the game where they didn't look invincible, but the 49ers game, they looked invincible. And then they followed up and won a huge, AFC welterweight fight against the Buffalo Bills, which is easier said than done. And Burrow went toe-to-toe with Josh Allen and, ultimately played better football for more portions of the game than Josh Allen did. Not that I think Allen played bad. It also certainly helps having T. Higgins and Ja'Marr Chase and the other pass catchers in Cincinnati. But, hey, I think the Bengals are back. And the defense played a really, really good game, especially after that opening touchdown from Buffalo. So I think Lou Anarumo is back in his bag. That unit's playing great. Joe Burrow and that offense look like they are right back where they were in their postseason run to the Super Bowl 2 years ago and basically who they were second half of last year going into the playoffs. So Cincinnati's back. And the top 3 remains the same. Ravens, Chiefs, and Eagles in that order. 2 weeks from now, we get to see Ravens and Bengals. I cannot wait to see that game. Ultimately, I think right now, like if you were to ask me who has a better chance of beating Kansas City in the playoffs, I'd say Cincinnati. But I think this could be the year. This might be the year where the Ravens are actually the second best team in the AFC. We've been saying it for a little bit, but Lamar's had some injuries, and obviously they've done a lot of work over the last 2 years, rehauling both coordinator spots, DC and OC. So maybe now they actually have the right schemes in place to be the second best team in the AFC. But we'll find out week 11 when we can see the Ravens and the Bengals duke it out. But right now they're side by side in my rankings. And then you got the Kansas City Chiefs, best team in the AFC still. I am still looking for a wide receiver to step up for sure, but Rashee Rice continues to score touchdowns. So for my fantasy team, that's awesome. And they have enough ability to mix it up between winning on the ground and winning in the air. But even more than that, 4 years ago, we used to say, the Kansas City Chiefs win with their offense. They're an offensive team, right? I think now you got to say it's 50-50. Like, they win with their offense and with their defense. Like, it's true complementary football on both sides, which just speaks to how much over the last 4 to 5 years that they've been able to overhaul that side of the ball and really give Spags the pieces he needs. So I've been super impressed with that side of the ball all year long. That continued against Miami, and the most dynamic and highest scoring offense in the league. They showed out there against the Dolphins, and ultimately did enough for that 14 points of offense to be all you need to win a game. And of course you get the strip against Tyreek Hill. It's a story that can't even write itself. It's so good, and ultimately that proves to kind of be the difference. That touchdown they stole right before halftime. So major credit there to the Kansas City defense. I think in a lot of ways they're winning games because of that, more so than their offense. And then we get the Eagles at 1. They take down a divisional rival, a team that some people are saying is the second best in the NFC, and they're going to see each other one more time this year, and I could see it being a home-and-home split. It definitely helps having Philadelphia be at home there, but they just looked like the better team. And really, Dallas was having to play catch-up most of the second half. So I think that's a spot where Philadelphia wants to put themselves, so it'd be interesting to see if the game script was flipped and Philadelphia has to come from behind, how that might have changed that game. But ultimately, Philly got Dallas where they wanted them, trailing in the second half, and then ultimately kind of staved off that late comeback and a couple opportunities that Dallas had later on in that contest. Obviously, big factor moving forward is going to be Jalen Hurts and his health. Obviously, he comes up limping at points of the game, so that's going to be iffy because the step down from Jalen Hurts to anybody is going to be pretty steep. But if he's healthy, I'm happy with how the Eagles are playing. But guys, that does it for my Week 10 NFL Power Rankings. Tell me what you think down below. Who's too high? Who's too low? Who's your favorite team? And where should they be in these Power Rankings? Love to hear your thoughts, and I respond to every comment, so let it be known down below. That's going to do it for me. Be sure to come back next on the channel. We're going to have the Hurry Up Offense previewing all the Week 10 games. So come back tomorrow for that podcast with me, Mason and JT. But until then, my name's Teach. We are signing off.